Vhagar the dragon is now wrapped around the Empire State Building. This 270-foot inflatable dragon replica is wrapped around there to promote Season 2 of House of Dragons. This is a spin-off to Game of Thrones, which sadly is not a game show where the royal family plays musical chairs. And he's wrapped around there, and it reminds me of this Taco Bell cup for the Roland Emmerich Godzilla film. You could also get a Godzilla that wrapped around your cup. You could then put the cup with Godzilla wrapped around the Empire State Building inside the wraparound cup holder, and now Godzilla is wrapped around a cup of Godzilla wrapped around a building. It's Godzilla Inception. These Taco Bell cups had to come out after the movie was released, because when this movie was coming out, they were super protective of how Godzilla looked, and they didn't want anyone to know before they got to the theater. And because they didn't want to show Godzilla in any of the marketing, they had to be clever with things like this bus that says his foot is as long as this bus. But in the end, all of this is a reference to King Kong, who climbed that building in the 1933 film. The building was only 2 years old when King Kong climbed to the top. Now, this dragon reminded me immediately of the inflatable Kong that once was on top of the Empire State Building, and that is quite a story. We'll get to that in a moment. I wanted to tell you a little bit about the very top of the Empire State Building. Originally, they were going to have a mooring up there for Zeppelins. This is a pre-Photoshop that was made into a postcard. They never actually landed Zeppelins up there, but there was a plan at the beginning that this was a good idea. The Empire State Building was the tallest building in the world when it was built. It has its own zip code. They actually kept the title of tallest building in the world until the World Trade Center opened in 1973. So for the 1976 version of King Kong, they used the World Trade Center and not the Empire State Building. The towers were also used for the poster of Godzilla vs. Megalon. Here's a little bit of trivia I never thought I'd get a chance to talk about. In 1978, there was a French film made named Bye Bye Monkey. This starred Gerard Depardieu, who you may remember from My Father the Hero and Bogus and a few other films he did in the United States. This film tells the story of a man in New York who goes by the World Trade Center to the Battery Park landfill, which was there in the 70s and 80s. It was essentially a sandy beach in front of the World Trade Center, and he finds, buried in the sand, the discarded prop from the 1976 King Kong movie. And then inside the giant King Kong prop, Gerard Depardieu finds a baby chimp that he raises as his own child. It's a real movie. All right, so let's talk about the inflatable King Kong, because my goodness, this was a debacle. So to celebrate the 50th birthday of King Kong, they had this highly anticipated event that was covered on the news wall to wall. This King Kong cost over 100 grand to make, and this is in 1983 dollars, and he was 2,500 pounds. The plan was to take him in the elevator all the way up to the roof. Unfortunately, in the Empire State Building, you actually have to switch elevators to a smaller elevator to get that high. And they didn't plan ahead, and their crate was too big for the second elevator. Now, at this point, they should have ordered another crate, had the crate built, brought in there, and then transferred it from the one crate to the other. But instead, they decided on the worst possible idea, dragging this thing up several flights of stairs. So they kind of threw it up the stairs, guys dragging this thing across flight after flight. All of the ropes got all tangled up, and it got some holes in it. Meanwhile, the news reporters are outside because they're broadcasting this live, and it never inflates. It never goes up. And they keep pushing the news back. Oh, it'll be a few more hours. Come back later. And it still never inflates. The entire day goes by. So then we get a press conference with the representatives from the company that made the ape, and they blame the building, saying that the building was not right for this King Kong. They flew in repairmen to fix this, and people are looking up, wondering why this King Kong looks like a trash bag flapping in the wind. Actress Maureen Stapleton was there to read a statement by Fay Wray, the woman from the King Kong movie. They got Kong halfway inflated, and they figured that was the best that was going to happen for now, so they went ahead with their press event. Maureen again read the statement from Fay Wray. The organizers talked about what a wonderful success this was. Biplanes flew around the Empire State Building. as the half-inflated Kong looked like a piece of chewing gum stuck to the side of the building. So they then remove Kong, and he's never been inflated, right? They're going to reinstall him once they straighten everything out and get a chance to patch him. At this point, it's been about a week, and no one has seen the inflated Kong that they've all been waiting for. And then they announce they're going to have somebody rappel down, and he's going to hang there and fix this. But the winds are too high, so he can't. The news had nothing else to do, so they interviewed the repairman. Then they interviewed a kid that was stuck in a fence on the roof. And finally, King Kong was mostly inflated at the top of the Empire State Building. And then King Kong collapses. A rip is in his neck. A rip is in his shoulder. Every time they patch a rip, another one seems to appear. He was never fully inflated, and when he was mostly inflated, that was for less than 24 hours. They finally gave up, and they took him to Central Park, where he was displayed lying down on the grass. And then a few months later, they took him to England, where he was mounted on the Cumberland Hotel. For the next few weeks, they put him on a few other buildings, including the Blackpool Tower. Now, there was another inflatable King Kong in the 1980s that was put on buildings in Ohio. This ape is actually Goliath, but if you look at any of the people installing him, they referred to him as King Kong, and even their equipment said King Kong right on it. Goliath was the titular Gorilla at Large in the 1954 film Gorilla at Large. This is a film about a gorilla that escapes the circus and does a lot of crazy gorilla antics. He's not gigantic, and he does not climb up any buildings in the film. Now, you may wonder why they were doing this much promotion for a 34-year-old film being shown on television. The reason was this was being shown in 3D, and this was all the rage in the 80s. TV networks would show a 3D movie. They'd team up with usually 7-Eleven, but in this case, Rax, the fast food chain, and you'd have to go to that place to get your 3D glasses, and then that night, you'd all gather around the TV and watch something in 3D. There were 5 other cities that had the inflatable Goliath outside of their buildings, including Cincinnati. By the way, currently, if you go to the Empire State Building, not only will you see the dragon outside, but you can see King Kong inside. This is pretty cool. They've got the King Kong hands poking through some fake walls, and then they have screens that show King Kong looking in and breathing at you. Speaking of big inflatable things, this is a inflatable Jack Slater to promote the film Last Action Hero. They put this out in the harbor in New York City. And after he was done floating in the harbor, they displayed him just from the waist up. So I guess they folded him up in Hollywood, California. Hollywood does a lot of promotions like this. When Godzilla King of Monsters came out a few years ago, this is what they did at the Cinerama Dome. I love this theater. This theater is currently closed, and I don't know if it's ever going to reopen, but I have such great memories of visiting that when I was in California. Promotions like this aren't new. This is from when King Kong came out in 1933. They actually took this giant prop King Kong head that they had, and they displayed it out in front of a few different theaters, including Grauman's Chinese Theater in Hollywood. Here's another wild Hollywood promotion. This was for the movie Cool World. This came out in 1992. It starred a young Brad Pitt, and Kim Basinger played an animated girl. To promote this movie, they actually made a giant wooden framed cutout of her, and they sat her on top the Hollywood sign. But she suffered a similar fate to King Kong when the high winds just knocked her down the hill of Mount Lee. I love it out in Hollywood. I got to go back. I haven't been there for several years. I do have some postcards from Hollywood that I bought when I was out there, and I am going to be sending those to my Patreon members. So if you want a postcard, it's just $3 on Patreon. Go on and check that out. Big thanks to everybody on there. Michael and Jessica, Carrie Ann Fisher, Chris Nevlin, and Demon Mittenhands. You can join up for just $3. The one thing I won't get to see if I go back to California is the Movieland Wax Museum. I used to go to that and spend hours there, and I took tons of video. It was way before YouTube, but I took all my video and I put it into a video about it. And I'm really glad I recorded every inch of that museum. It's sadly long gone, but you can watch all about it in a video that I'm going to put right up here. Otherwise, YouTube says this is what is best for you, and if you need more videos, I got a second channel, and I'll see you next time.